Welcome back to Ion Foxborough. I'm Chris Mason here with Mark Daniels. It is Monday, Eclipse Day, big day for the region, apparently. But over the weekend, the Patriots made some serious news in extending Kyle Duggar. They agreed to a 4-year, $58 million deal with Duggar. 32 million of that is guaranteed. He can make up to 66 million. Mark, was this an overpayment? What do you make of the deal?
Um, I don't think it was an overpayment just because that's how the Patriots value Kyle Duggar. As we were told at the combine, the Patriots, and we're told by Elliot Wolf and Gerard Mayo, the Patriots, two of their biggest priorities this offseason were locking up Kyle Duggar and Michael Onwenu, and they handled Onwenu really fast in free agency. With Duggar, there's a little bit more uncertainty. So they placed that transition tag that would have paid him 13.8 million had he signed it. Transition tag also would have allowed the Patriots to match any offer Duggar got. But at the end of the day, that was just a way for the Patriots to fend off other teams and take their time with Duggar and extend him. And really, they view him as a core piece of their defense. They think their defense will revolve around Kyle Duggar. So with saying that, no, it's not an overpayment. I believe his like in terms of like the money he's making is like the sixth highest paid safety in the NFL. That's a lot. I mean, for a guy who's never been a Pro Bowler, but I would say, Chris, Kyle Duggar has Pro Bowl potential. Like he's a great athlete. He does a lot. He had the green dot in his head, whatever, linebacker, hybrid safety. The Patriots love him. So for my standpoint, hey, if you love the guy and you have the cap space, get him. I think you run into the problems where you would run into a problem if you lost him and you already stated this is a priority, right? Because then all of a sudden you have a giant roster hole. So like for a team that had near 50 million left over in cap space after free agency, I think it's fine. I'm fine with it. That's what they wanted to do. So you know what? You might as well spend the money on the guys you want.
So I think if you look at the market, I do think this is an overpayment, but I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's actually a good thing that they signed Duggar to this deal. And I think it shows the entire locker room that they're operating in good faith, right? They hit him with the transition tag and say, we want to keep working on an extension. Well, if you don't reach an extension after that, it's not a great look. It's not a great message. And they've reiterated over and over again that they want to, re-sign their homegrown talent. I think Duggar's a perfect example of a guy that's done everything right. He's durable, he's there all the time, smart, dependable, and now he's being rewarded. He's being paid as one of the best safeties in the league, and he is a very good safety. I think it's a little much, but at the end of the day, it's not my money. It's Robert Kraft's money, and they've got to spend it on somebody. So why not spend it on Kyle Duggar instead of, I know we've already talked about dumpster diving next month and trying to find some guys on the waiver wire and all that stuff. You have the money now. Pay guys like Kyle Duggar, pay Mike Onwenu, bring him back, keep your young talent here. And I think that's the right message where toward the end of the Belichick era, I mean, I think these guys knew that it was going to be a battle once they got to free agency, even to get paid, where Jacoby Myers is the perfect example of that, right? As the guy that you should have paid, you kind of nickel and dimed. Ultimately, he leaves for a slightly better deal with the Raiders, and you lose him, and you missed him terribly this year.
Yeah, I think you look at the guys the Patriots brought back, and like I don't have a problem with any of it. Like on
Mhm.
offense, it's Michael Onwenu, Hunter Henry, Kendrick Bourne. On defense, you bring back Josh Uche in a 1 year deal. You lock up Anthony Jennings for like what 3 or 4 year contract. Kyle Duggar, like they brought back good players. Like they clearly looked at the free agent market and said, you know what? We don't like they swung. I mean, Chris, they swung on some free agents,
Yeah.
offense and defense, and they missed on some big guys. But then they turned around and said, you know what? We like our own free agents better than a lot of the other guys in the open market. And when Elliot Wolf comes out and says, hey, we want to draft and develop and keep our own players, well, you better do it because you already said you wanted to do it. So by, locking in Kyle Duggar and Uwenu and Kendrick Bourne and all these guys, Anthony Jennings, Josh Uche back for a year, I like it. I understand from some fans that I've been getting tweeted at. People have been like, why would you bring back everyone on a 4-win team? Listen, if you lost the players they re-signed, you're worse, right? At the very least, the Patriots are not worse right now. I would argue they're not worse, even though they need a left tackle and an outside receiver, and we'll get to that. But I think the guys they brought back, at the very least, you retain good players that were a part of a pretty bad team. And I don't know if the
Yes.
Patriots were like horrible last year because of like they weren't bad last year because of like Kyle Duggar and Hunter
Yeah.
Henry and Kendrick Bourne and Josh Uche and Anthony Jennings. Like they were bad because they didn't have a quarterback. They were bad because they had no offensive weapons. Their offense was a giant cluster bleep, Like so
Well,
it's like
that
retaining your better players is the honestly, it's the way to go. You might
and
you might
that's
as well.
where the generalization from some of the fan base, like, why are you bringing all the same guys back? It's like, Well, defense was good last year. Like this is
Right.
Kyle Duggar. He plays defense. He doesn't play offense. Offense was the issue last year. And if you look at the offensive guys they brought back, I have no issue with it. Like let's just go one by one. Where Mike Onwenu, you needed to bring back. You need offensive line help. You needed that guy done. Hunter Henry, you had nobody under contract at tight end. Like you needed to fill that void. Free agent market is thin. Like yeah, that makes sense. Kendrick Bourne is on a very, very incentive laden deal coming off the ACL tear. I think if he proves it and makes all that money, all sides are very happy. And if it doesn't work out, you're not shooting yourself in the foot here because of the way the deal is structured. So like you look at those three guys on offense, and it's like, yeah, well, why wouldn't you make those re-signings too? So I think by and large, like bringing their own guys back has been good. It's just been all right, but what else are you doing on offense? And
Yeah.
maybe that's Drake May at three,
And
and
there
maybe there's
and there's
wide
this
receivers that you get in the draft. Like they need to add more on the offense, but by and large, I have no issue with them bringing their own guys back.
there's like that saying, right? The devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And like you lose any of these guys, you have to bring in external free agents or target certain people in the draft. And, as we just mentioned, like the Patriots have obvious needs they're going to target in the draft, right? Quarterback, tackle, receiver. By retaining all your internal free agents, you allow yourself to move around the draft board and draft guys at those three very big needs. Like it would stink for them if they went into draft and was like, what we have to do, guys, the first 4 rounds, we have to draft a safety. No, like no, we have to do in the draft, you have to draft offensive players. So you know what I mean? So like in a way, this is sort of shaping up this month where like I think we have a pretty good idea what the Patriots' needs are. And by retaining Duggar, those needs remain the same. They can focus on whether it be Drake May or Jaden Daniels at 3. The second or third round, we can talk about right now. Tackle, receiver. And Chris, last week we talked about the tackle position. Like my gut feeling is they're going to attack tackle early, whether it be the second round or trade up. But the other option we're going to dive into here is wide receiver. The Patriots desperately need a top wide receiver. And an easy way to find that, I mean, an easy slash not so easy, is to draft one. Now, second round wide receivers, I would just say it's a really good spot in the second round to find good wide receivers, right? Michael Pittman, T. Higgins, I mean, hell, Michael Thomas. I'm just rattling off random names that were drafted in the second round, but you can find good players in the second round and even in the third round. Last year was Tank Dell. I think Amron St. Brown was a fourth rounder. I believe Terry McLaurin was a third rounder, Deontay Johnson a fourth rounder. So like as we head into these last what do we got 2-3 weeks before the draft, Chris? I think the Patriots need to draft a receiver. I think they honestly, I'm gonna go and say it. I'm 100% guaranteeing the Patriots are gonna draft a receiver. I don't know what round that's going to be in. My prediction would be third or second, but I think this is
Will
like
you guarantee that it's a top three round, like first, second, third round? Will you guarantee they take one with one of those three
yeah,
picked?
yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna guarantee receiver in the top 3 rounds. I don't know what happens if I get it wrong. We'll figure it out. But
Hey, if you
I
guys have like punishment suggestions or anything like that, feel free to tweet them at us. All
uh,
ears.
yeah. Patriots don't draft a receiver in the top 3 rounds. I will donate some money to like the Jimmy Fund or something. But I
Oh
mean, no,
no. That's I mean, you're doing that in addition to some sort of eating challenge or something
yeah,
bizarre. Like
we'll come up with it. But here's a question for you. I think I know how you feel about this. Do you think the Patriots should target receiver as early as the second?
I do, yeah. And I think a lot of it's going to depend on like how the board falls and trying to be flexible. I think at the top of the second round, if they stay at 34 overall, take either the best tackle or the best receiver on the board. Like whichever you have ranked higher on your own board, take the best player at either of those two spots. You have the obvious need. Be smart about it. Take the best player there and then move forward. What about you?
I would say my argument would be target tackle, even if that means trading into the first round. I think talking to, on this podcast, we've talked to Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah, and I think what's obvious about this draft class, according to them, is that there will be good tackles in this draft, very deep, but it's like a first, then maybe in the top of the second, right? So if you have tackles on the board at the top of the second that can be starters in this league, I think that's what the Patriots 100% have to do because the tackle class it drops off a little bit after that, right? You can start to argue a little bit. Well, a guy like Houston's Patrick Paul, is he available in the third? I like him. I also wonder if Patrick Paul, because he's a 6'8" athletic tackle, will go in the second. It's like I think it would be harder for the Patriots to target tackle in the third, and I think it would be easier for them to tackle receiver in the third or fourth round. So, for my argument, would be they have to draft a receiver. I think they should trade back into the second. That's what I would do. I would draft a tackle, the whatever, 32 or 34 where they are, or I would trade back up. And then I would try to trade back into the second and draft a receiver. But I think some of the names here, Chris, are really interesting. You mocked a pretty cool one to the Patriots. I really, really like Adonai Mitchell from Texas. He's super athletic. Like if
Yeah.
he's there at the top of the second round, I agree with you in your mock that like it would be really hard for the Patriots to like pass up a potential number one receiver. I think they still have to figure out the left tackle spot, but there are some really interesting guys in this class, and it's deep. It is like my argument for the third round is that they say it's you could find a starter in the third or fourth round. I think that fits into the Patriots' need. But I think what you did in your mock draft today, we're talking Monday, you identified the Patriots a way to get a potential number one, right? And
Yeah.
that's a huge need. So I like I'm not scoffing at your take because I understand it 100%.
No, and that this is like a really favorable like mock draft for the Patriots too, where I was running simulators like all day on Friday, like trying to figure out the best ways to go and like how it could work. And Mitchell winds up at 34 in a decent like amount of these, and that could happen. I also wouldn't be opposed to if they really liked him jumping up to like 29 or 30 or whatever and taking him in the first round. Because as we've discussed on this pod before, like if you trade at the end of the third round, then you're basically locking in a fifth year for these guys if they pan out too, because they have the fifth year option. And so I do like Mitchell there a lot. But one question I would have for you, do they need to take an X receiver, or would you be okay with a slot guy on day two? Like what's the profile that you're looking for?
There are some slot receivers I really like. Ricky Pearsall at Florida is incredibly athletic. I like him. And there's a kid from Washington to Jalen McMillan, who's like a bigger slot. I like these slot receivers, but Chris, they have to take an X. They desperately need an outside receiver because right now, your outside receiver, who is it? It is Jalen Rager. Jalen Rager or Kayshon Boutte. You could maybe try to move Tyquan Thornton. So basically, what I'm saying is the Patriots don't have an X receiver. They don't. They don't have an X receiver. So looking at some of the names, I think there are some decent ones that could be there in rounds 2, 3. Like my favorite is LSU's Brian Thomas, but you'd have to trade to like maybe the high teens. That's not happening. Brian Thomas from LSU was awesome. He's a big X receiver. But going down like Xavier Legette from South Carolina is a guy who can play outside. The thing with him, he wasn't very productive for 4 years and he
Yeah.
blew up last year. So it's like, what's up with that? Keon Coleman, Florida State, is a name that's been attached to the Patriots a lot. He's a bigger X receiver. He's 6'3, 213. He would definitely fit the mold. There's some other guys who are like, I talk to like ZX, and casual football fans might not know what that means. Technically, I would say KJ Osborne and Kendrick Bourne are Z receivers where they can play in the outside, but also the inside. An X receiver is more of a big body like Devontae Parker. The Patriots want a better X receiver than Devontae Parker. Like Devontae Walker, UNC. I mean, if they drafted Jake May at 3, could you get Devontae Walker from his teammate in the third round? I think that's not a bad spot for him. Jerry Rice's son, Brandon Rice, could be another third, fourth rounder. He's from USC. Another kid named Jermaine Burton, Alabama, could be a third rounder. It's interesting to me, Chris, because it's hard to go into the draft saying, "Hey, we need to find our quarterback, our left tackle, and an X receiver." If it all breaks perfectly, the Patriots can do it. I don't think that's going to happen. So
And
I guess,
we've seen the
right.
pitfalls of trying to force the X receiver with Devontae Parker, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the perfect example of okay, like you like the body type, you like the prototype, you're going to keep playing him out there. He's going to get a ton of snaps and he's just not productive. I mean, he looks the part. He looks like an X receiver. He should be a good one. He was at one point, but he's just not anymore. And I think if you force that, it can really backfire to some degree. So, I mean, I think best case scenario, they take an X, but I don't think you can force it either because I think we've seen what happens when you try to do that.
And I think at the end of the day, the Patriots just need better receivers. So
Yeah.
like if say like they do like a name we've talked about before, Lad McConkey, Georgia, like a 5'11, more of a slot receiver. He can play outside, but like say they really like him and they draft Lad McConkey, which just has a phenomenal name, and he turns out to be better than Demario Douglas. He turns out to be better than KJ Osborne and like Kendrick Bourne. All right, fine. If you draft a slot receiver like Ricky Pearsall, who I really like, you draft him and he's better than everyone. Well, you know what? There you go. And you can
And your
move
wide
people.
receivers are better. Like
Yeah.
your group is better if he's better than everyone else. That's just how it's going to work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, the Patriots need an X, but what I want them to do, Chris, the receiver, I want them to double dip.
Hmm.
Honestly, I wouldn't like say like if my plan would be like quarterback 3, tackle 2, and then 3, 4. I want just give me multiple. Give me multiple. There was who's another one? Who's the kid from UCF who's visiting with them? I think his name is Javon Baker. I think
Yeah, that
yeah.
sounds right.
Yeah, Javon Baker. Like the people are saying Javon Baker could be like a fourth round prospect. All right, cool. Get a guy in the third, get a guy in the fourth, and just take as many swings as you can. I think that's what they do. I think they should double dip at tackle. I think they should double dip at receiver. But receiver, what's really interesting to me about this though, Chris, let's think about like the Packers for a second too. Like Elliott Wolf and the Packers have drafted some really good receivers. I mean, Devontae Adams is the best one, but like you go down the list of some of those guys there, even like the Randall Cobbs and all these other names. I was like looking over the history of the Packers receivers. I'm like, oh wow, they've routinely like nabbed like number twos and number threes in the draft.
Well, it's
And
just interesting though, like how much of that is Aaron Rodgers making them into like legitimate twos and threes where, Tom Brady elevated guys around here for a very long time. Aaron Rodgers seemed to do the same thing with a lot of those guys who haven't had a ton of success like post Green
right.
Bay. But I'm with you on the double dip. I think that if they have 8 picks, if they like stick with 8 picks in this draft, 6 of them should be on the offensive side of the ball. Like that is the group that needs to be overhauled. I double dip on the quarterback too, as we talked about. In my mock that I dropped today, also had Joe Milton from Tennessee going to them in the 6th round, where he would be a fascinating juxtaposition with someone like Drake May. But I mean, why not just keep throwing darts at the board there? You're so thin on offense. You need bodies and you need talent. Why not just keep shooting there?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was reading this old story about like Elliot Wolf and that, and there were some interesting like stories about him liking certain prospects, but one of the stories was about a receiver. I believe it was Greg Jennings that he really liked, and I think he was from like a smaller school. Yeah, he was from Western Michigan. And I guess Elliot Wolf, one of his like first years there working, under his father and with the Packers, he was like stumping for like Greg Jennings and they drafted him in the second round. I just thought it was a cool story. But some of the other names the Packers drafted when Ellie was there, Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, Randall Cobb, like James Jones. But you're right, they had Aaron Rodgers, but those are solid guys. So
They are.
like the issue with Bill Belichick is I brought it up this weekend when they re-signed Duggar. I was like, Bill Belichick and the Patriots didn't have a problem drafting on defense. They didn't have a problem building their defense. The issues came on offense and specifically receiver, right? N'Keal Harry in 19 over AJ Brown and Debo Samuel, Tyquan Thornton in the second round over George Pickens, and I'd say Alex Pierce, even though that's a weaker class, but like they just haven't done it that well. Demario Douglas looks like a hit. He's a little bit undersized, injury prone, I'd say, but like they need to get better at drafting receivers. I hope for their sake it changes with Elliott Wolf.
Yeah, and I hope Pop Douglas can stay healthy, but like that's part of the reason why he was a 6th round pick, right? Is because he's small, he's undersized, and he suffered 2 concussions in his first year in the NFL. And that's like a really scary thing and a hard thing. So like you hope he can stay healthy, but there's a reason that he was still around in the 6th round of the draft.
Yeah.
And that's like Malcolm Mitchell is one of the only receivers they hit on recently, but he also had injury red flags. And I think if you do it all over again, you draft Malcolm Mitchell where you do because of the Falcons Super Bowl in that season. But ultimately, that wasn't a sustainable long-term solution, right?
Right. I once heard from some former teammates of Malcolm Mitchell who told me it's like these sad stories of him being so good in practice that everyone was that year. Players were so impressed with Malcolm Mitchell in 2016. They thought he was like the next big thing, and like Tom Brady liked him. He had an instant connection with Tom Brady, which showed a lot of us that like Malcolm Mitchell was going to be good. That's one of the sadder what ifs, with the Patriots. But another part of this is luck, right? Like the Houston Texans, I think what they did, last week when they traded for Stephon Diggs, like the Houston Texans drafted Tank Dell in the third round and they hit. There's a lot of guys that get drafted in the second, third round receivers that don't hit. But like if you're one of those teams that gets your Amon St. Brown in the fourth round, man, you're golden. You're golden. I mean, the 49ers, Debo Samuel in the second, Brandon Ayuk at the end of the first, like you hit on these rookies and it's the easiest way to build your team. And as the Patriots found out in free agency, Chris, it's really hard to land top receivers in free agency because, like, one, they're almost never available. But two, when they are, it's kind of hard to convince someone to come to New England where it's cold. You have taxes, and right now there's quarterback uncertainty.
Can I ask you a random wide receiver question?
Yeah,
Is Tyquan Thornton going to be on the roster at the end of training camp?
I don't think so. That's my prediction right now. I've been looking over the depth chart, and it's like how many do they keep? Five, right? So it's like if Kendrick Bourne's healthy, you already have KJ Osborne, Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas. There's three. Juju Smith-Schuster at $12 million. You think they're keeping him? That's four. And then Jalen Reagor is probably your kickoff returner. There's 5. And then I think they're going to draft a rookie or 2. So there's 6, maybe 7. Who goes? And honestly,
Right.
if they were to double dip a receiver, say third, fourth round, you could make an argument to cut Juju Smith-Schuster. Eat the 12 million. You've already paid it.
Right.
Cut Tyquan Thornton, have KJ Osborne, Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, 2 rookies, and Jalen Reagor is your kick returner. So right now, my prediction on Tyquan Thornton would be no. I think he has to prove he can run routes. It's like right now he's just such a bit player. He's really fast and straight line speed, but he's not bringing anything else. So like my prediction would be he gets cut and or traded for like a 7th round pick.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the only thing that might save a roster spot is if Bourne starts the season on PUP, and they go from there and they're just starting slow with him. But ultimately, yeah, I don't really see it either, especially if you're trying to bring new receivers in. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think the depth chart is coming into focus already. And like, if you double dip, it really like wide receiver competition is going to be fascinating. And then like, what happens with Kayshon Boutte too? Where Gerard Mayo still with the team. He obviously has the potential. He has not realized it, and he's dealing with all that stuff. So, he might be someone that you could cut and sneak through to the practice squad at this point, given everything that's gone on. But
I guess you could say the same thing with Tyquan Thornton. I don't like with his speed. I wonder if another team would claim him if you cut him, maybe. But you never know what's going to happen. Like Tyquan Thornton just hasn't been healthy. He's put on some weight this offseason. See the videos and the photos on Instagram. I think that's great that he's putting on weight. But hey, man, he also needs to play like a receiver when it comes to running routes in the route tree. He's very limited right now.
it's kind of weird that he's put on so much weight so quickly this offseason because he said that was like a goal of his last year. And then he told us, he's like, yeah, I put on weight in the offseason. It was like, okay, I mean, you look pretty similar. Then he was listed, I think, at 3 pounds heavier on the roster. But this offseason, it looks like he's put on a bunch of muscle. So it's like, you training differently? Like, how has this happened?
Hey man, what Kendrick Bourne say last year? He put on like 15 pounds of muscle. Didn't he tell us that? Like
I don't remember.
Kendrick Bourne said something wild last year that he put on a ton of muscle, but he did. I think, and so what I'm saying is I think Kendrick Bourne put on like 10, 15 pounds of muscle last year or weighed more. And now Tyquan Thornton's working out with his guy out there in the Portland area. So maybe that's what it is.
Hey, there you go. But all right, that'll be a fascinating one to follow. Thanks for following along with us, guys, and we'll catch you further on down the trail.